to me, this whole play it's a global business. The biggest market in the world is the US. Most of our customers are in the US. I want to be really focused on growing the business primarily from a US perspective.
That's Damian Cullen, president of Bluechiip, a cryonics group brand, a company forging the future of cryogenic sample management. Bluechiip's patented cryogenic technology is redefining how life science organizations can use real-time sample traceability, temperature-resilient identification, and complete chain of custody confidence across biobanking, cell and gene therapy, and advanced R&D environments. Welcome to the Biotech Stack, where we explore the cutting-edge technology fueling the future of life sciences and biotech. From next-generation lab automation and AI-driven drug discovery to breakthrough biomanufacturing and research tools, we dive deep into the innovations transforming health, food, energy, and the businesses behind them. I'm Corinne Regan, your host. In today's episode of the Biotech Stack, we talk to Damian Cullen, president of Bluechiip, a cryonics brand group. We talk about how Damian took the leap from venture capital into biotech operations, reviving Bluechiip from administration and rebuilding it with a global vision centered in the U.S. market. Damian discusses how he is steering the company's advanced sample management technology toward becoming the industry standard, pairing engineering excellence with a business-first approach to scalability, simplicity, and real-world lab adoption. Let's get started. Damian, thank you so much for joining. I'd like to start with asking if you could share a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing for me, finding myself as the owner of Bluechiip, is that I don't come from a background in biosciences or life sciences at all. I've got no connection to that industry and I know very little about it. So my background was finance and investment. I've got some venture capital holdings. I've really been doing a lot more VC type investing in the last probably 7 years. So that's been the direction that my life's taken. So I really shouldn't probably be an owner of Bluechiip, but things panned out and, it took me down that path, which I can explain more as the interview goes on.
Okay, perfect. So give me a little more detail of this investment background. Were you investing already in companies that were in the life sciences, biotech? Was this industry on the radar already in that part of your world?
Not really. In fact, probably quite the opposite because I know so little about the space. I generally have a rule when I'm looking at venture capital investments that if it's health related, I'm probably not interested. And that's nothing to do with how good the industry is or the good work that it does or anything like that. It's just that it's such a complex area. I don't know enough about it. When you get regulators in there as well and you don't know how to deal or what you're doing, then it just gets too hard. I mean, I have no idea how long drug cycles take to come through and get trials and FDA approval and the like. So, and medical devices, I don't know if they're good, bad, or indifferent, to be honest. So it's an area that generally I just say, you know what, it's too hard. I'm rather agnostic about where I do invest. I like the investments that make money. That's kind of the overview that I've got. But sciences, generally not.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about how you did get involved with Bluechiip, if this is a bit outside of your wheelhouse.
Sure. So Bluechiip, if we go back into the history, Bluechiip was an Australian stock exchange listed company. So that was, you'd call it a micro cap, very small, but it was on the market in Australia, trading publicly. And a mate of mine told me about it probably seven to 8 years ago, and said, you should have a look at this company. The technology is pretty cool. And so I started doing my due diligence on it, and I had a look at the technology they've got and sort of, applied my base level of understanding of what was going on in that space. And I'm like, well, everyone should be using this technology. Clearly it's miles better than, barcodes and the like. So from an investment perspective, the investment case made sense to me. And so, and buying stock on a market is pretty simple. You buy it and you let the team do their job and hopefully they do it well. So I bought that and liked the business, went down and visited the company a couple of times and used to catch up with the CEO and just get updates fairly regularly. So I was invested in the company and knew a little bit about it through that process. Um, but yeah, ultimately the company wasn't overly successful. So in that space, and so hence that sort of was what got me involved. I was already a shareholder, and so late last year the company was in financial trouble. Me and a few others loaned them some extra money to try and get them through. Ultimately, that didn't work, and the company went into in Australia they call it administration, which is the beginning of bankruptcy proceedings, and the administrator comes into the business when the directors deem that it's no longer liquid, and then they start a process to work out what do we do with this thing? Does it have any value? Can it be sold? Do we just liquidate it and there's no future whatsoever? So that process started in February 2025 this year, and the process went through. And at that point, I thought, "Oh, Bluechiip's done. I'll walk away." And then I sort of had a bit of a think about it. And thought, "Oh, I wonder if I tried to buy it, if maybe there's a chance to do that." So I started going down that rabbit hole and making some inquiries, and because of the nature of the business is quite specific, I think it probably didn't attract a lot of investment interest. And the reason for that is the technology component of the actual physical chips. Then you've got a hardware component of the actual readers that read the chips. Then you've got a software component that ties it all together. And that's a little bit unusual. There's software companies out there, there's hardware companies out there, but not necessarily one that brings the three disciplines together. So I think other life sciences businesses probably struggled with that a little bit. So it ended up that I thought there was a few parties interested, but through that administration process, kind of got to the point where I realised I don't think there's a lot of other interest there. I knew there was at least one other party, and that was an Australian party, and I met with them to see if we could do something together. You're not in this process, you're never quite sure if there's someone else there or not, because the administrator won't tell you. So there could have been more, but I knew for sure that there was the two of us, and so we ended up both putting in proposals to buy the business, and there's probably a little bit of a story to that, but ultimately I was successful, and so then I was like, oh, okay. I raised some money from myself. I'm the biggest shareholder, and then from other colleagues and connections, and we raised enough to get the business up and running and buy it. So that was finalised on the 4th of July, and 3 days later, on the Monday, I walked into a business that had been dormant for 4 months with no staff, no internet, no nothing, and an empty office that was dirty and dusty, and where the staff had been terminated in February and had basically just been told, get your gear and get out. So it was a pretty surreal thing to walk into that, and you're just given a pass to get into the building. It's like, there you go, there's your business, off you go. It's a global business, but you've got no staff. It's day one. What's your next move?
So what is your next move? So you decide on a company that has a solution, right? It's not just, like you said, hardware, software. It's this full solution package, but there is no staff as soon as you open the door to the building. So what does that look like for you as the new owner on day one?
It was quite overwhelming. You walk into the office, and it's like, okay, here I am. So I went for a bit of a wander around and looked at lots of machines that I have probably still no idea what they do, to be honest, and all this sort of stuff. And then you just go, right, well, what's the process that I've got to go through to try and get this thing going? Because, I'd paid the money, I had to get it going. So the first thing you do is you get internet connection. Second thing you do is you get access to the data, the servers, and try and start finding out, what is the business? What have I bought? Who's who in the zoo? Then you start finding out the ex-staff's contact details and getting in touch with them, and finding out what do you think went wrong? What's the solution? Try and figure out who's part of the problem and who's part of the solution. All those things. So it was really just that. The early days was a matter of getting the key staff back. So I managed to get the old CEO that ran the company back within a few weeks. And that was pretty crucial because he knew, you know, the business. I didn't know the business. I didn't know the customers. Um, I didn't even know who the customers really were. I'd heard, you hear a bit about it, but I really didn't know much at all. But I just came in with a businessman's hat on rather than um, someone from the pharma industry's hat on. And that's how I approach it today, to be honest. You learn, once you get into something, you learn pretty quickly some of the details, but I don't have a background. I'll never understand the industry or the technology as well as probably, people that studied it and grew up in the industry. But I've got people in the industry that do know that, or in the company, I should say, that do know that and can fulfill those tasks for us. So it's a matter of just bringing the team together. So the first month was pretty crazy, just trying to work out, right, what do we do in the US? Because that's where the customers are, that's the market. But of course, I've never done business in the US before, really. I've been to the US plenty of times. So I love it over there, but how do we structure that? What do we do? What do we do with the company structure? We ended up going with a dual company structure. The old company was headquartered in Australia with a subsidiary in the US. I flipped that on its head and went with a US parent company and an Australian subsidiary. And the reason for structuring in that way is you kind of need to have, when you've got employees in the US and you want to do business there, you kind of need to have a company just to set up bank accounts and to be able to pay the staff and do all those things. The reason I set it up as a US parent was that to me, this whole play it's a global business. The biggest market in the world is the US. Most of our customers are in the US. I want to be really focused on growing the business primarily from a US perspective. So at the moment, I'm putting a board together. My focus on that is to get US board members, not Australian board members, because I want people that can help me navigate through that US market and grow the business. If we get the US right, the rest of the world just kind of falls in behind. So it makes no sense to me to try and get the Australian piece first and then ask the US to follow, because that's not how the world works. So my focus is very much US, American board, American sales. It's an American company, really, that just happens to have been founded in Australia with some cool technology. So that technology piece is still happening in Australia. We've got the engineers and the likes here. But to me, I bought an American company effectively. I've set it up that way. When I raise money for the next round, I want to do that in the US. And ultimately, as a business guy, there'll be an exit at some point, and it's probably going to be a US exit. So again, why make it difficult and set up an Australian company they've got to buy? Just do it all in America. That makes it easy for people to invest if they're investing from America into an American business. It makes it easier for them ultimately one day to buy the company or do whatever we do if it's a US entity and we're going into the US market. So to me, it's all about America.
Okay, that makes sense. And then do you have any plans to focus on Australia at all, or is it truly it's because it was here and so there'll be a subsidiary, but outside of that, 99% of the focus is going to be in the United States?
Yeah, most of the focus is the United States. So we've got the lab in Australia, and we've got engineers that have got many years of experience working with our specific technology. So that would be a challenge to try and move elsewhere. So hence we keep that part in Australia. In terms of customers, it'd be nice to have some Australian customers. One, because it's an ideal product for, doesn't matter where you are. But two, it would be good to have some customers that are closer to our engineers so that, if there's problems, if we're fine tuning and getting product fit right, the reality is that Australian labs are probably exactly the same as American labs. So it would be handy for our engineers to have some live customers a bit closer than across the pond. But beyond that, it's, the size of the US market is just so big that it just doesn't make sense to direct a lot of resources to a small market like Australia. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, I'm happy to get Australian customers and we'll look after them really well. But my focus on sales is America. I think the market's about 75% in the US is 75% of the global market. So as a numbers guy, I look at that and go, well, if 75% of the market's here, I don't need to focus anywhere else.
Absolutely. Well, to go into a little more detail on Bluechiip itself, just to give the audience a little more background on the technology, you've
Sure.
alluded to it a little bit. There's some barcodes and some sample management. I know you're not from the industry, but I would love to hear from you what exactly it is that Bluechiip does.
Yep. So Bluechiip developed a really tiny little microchip, and it's about 1 millimeter square. And what it does is it when it's pinged with some radio frequencies, it gives back a signal, and that signal tells us the unique number of that particular chip. And it also gives us a reading as to the temperature of that chip at the time that it was pinged. So that's what our hardware does and what our chips do. And the use case for our chips is primarily in cryogenic ultra cold storage. So in that space, you've got minus 80 degree Celsius freezers, and you've got minus 196 degree Celsius liquid nitrogen tanks for ultra cold or just very cold. And the problem in that space is if you think about your freezer at home and you've got stuff that's been in there for a week and in some cases months, you go and you pull something out and you go, I have no idea what that is. I can't even tell if it's, beef or chicken or whatever. So when you pull these things out of the freezer, they're covered in frost, very hard to read. Now, if you take an even colder freezer, the problem only gets bigger. So they're pulling samples out that have a barcode on them that they can't read. So the way that they read the barcodes is the lab technicians, if it's not too cold, they'll have a pair of rubber gloves on and they'll try and warm up the sample and brush off all the frost so they can hopefully work out what it is. That to me just seems crazy that you'd take a biological sample and then warm it up just so that you can get your part of the lab to work, as opposed to getting the sample and going, bang, we know what it is and we know what the temperature is. It's quicker, it's more efficient. I think the public would probably be pretty shocked if they realised what was actually happening. There's also cases I've heard in these labs where they've used a label of types, and because of the extreme environment, sometimes they fall off. So I've spoken to a lot of labs now, and I get the impression from comments they've made that there's probably about 20 to 25% of samples in a lot of these labs that they just don't know what they are. A lot of them have started with old either manual journals or Excel spreadsheets. And then, of course, when that person leaves the company, sometimes that just gets lost forever. Then the new person comes in and they don't know what's there, and they're not brave enough to throw things out that they don't know what they are because they could be important. So they've got these samples that just sit there and no one knows what they are or what to do with them. With our system, every sample has a code. It's tracked. It's pretty much impossible for anything to go wrong. So when I looked at those two scenarios, I'm like, well, it's crazy that they're doing this the way they've been doing it for the last 100 years. This is clearly a better solution. So our solution has the ability to read the chip. The hardware reads the chip and gives that information to a software database. That software then manages the system and gives complete confidence in every sample. And the technology can be used in not just vials, but it can be used at the various stages of the storing. So you can use it to label the freezer and the shelf and the rack and the box. You can go down to very granularly to each sample, or you can do it at a higher level where you're just tracking to the box level. There's just so many ways that it can be managed well. And yeah, when I looked at that, I went, well, this is clearly a better solution than what's on offer. It to me just made sense that technology should be the standard in the industry. So that's what we're trying to make it.
I couldn't agree more. Speaking of that market, we've talked a little bit about the regional market that you guys are focusing on, but what type of customers are using this product? Who's in this cryogenic storage space?
Yeah, well, they're labs, and typically the labs are owned by big pharma companies. So of the top 20 pharma companies in the world, I think 6 or 7 of them are already using Bluechiip in at least one lab. So this is a question I struggle with a little bit because I don't know the market. It's only been 4 months that I've been in the driver's seat. But it's generally the ones that I've come across and heard about are generally owned by big pharmas. There are some smaller players that are doing interesting things in the space because you can have your human blood or tissue samples or embryos or things like that taken. You can also have cancer therapies that companies are working on that they might make a batch of a particular cell and gene therapy type product, so they might be using storage for that. that will then be going out to people who won't have come originally from a particular patient. You've got other patients who have got the cell therapy where they're taking blood or cells from a body, and then they're re-engineering those for later placement back into the ultimate customer. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, there's big pharma are the main users, but there's also smaller labs that are working in the space.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that a little bit more. So going back to a bit of the strategy behind Bluechiip, now that Bluechiip is up and running again, and again focusing primarily in the US, what is that strategy? What does that next, let's say, 3 to 5 years look like? Is it just growth for the company? Is it an exit strategy? Would you mind going into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, there's lots of areas there. So it's definitely growth. So, when I took over the business, you look at the company, and the company ultimately failed in its previous incarnation. So you try to understand, okay, what happened? Why did it fail? What do we need to do differently this time around? And I don't think there was a single reason or point of failure in the previous business. I think it was probably like a lot of companies, it was a range of issues, cascading, timing. So I won't go into that in any great detail, but I think I've worked out pretty well what needs to be done, and we need to make using Bluechiip as easy as possible for our customers. And I don't think we were quite there previously. I've been on the ground in the States and visited most of our customers now and heard their feedback. And what we've got to do is just make it easy for people to use this product. We don't have to be the only solution in the space, but I think we can facilitate working with other almost competitors in the space. So, for example, there's other software providers. I don't want to see a situation where they necessarily have to choose between us and someone else. I think we should be able to integrate so that labs can do their work, only get to the information once, just have it seamless. The technology on the chip side is really good. Our reader technology can be better. And it's not the reader, it's the other things that I think we can incorporate into a better reader. So I've got our engineers working on that to come up with a newer version, a 2026 version that'll do, probably shouldn't give away too much for industry competition, but it'll be a big step up and provide a lot more functionality. We want to use AI as much as possible, obviously.
Do you have AI capabilities currently?
Not really.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things you can do, I think, these days where, there's repetitive functions that people are doing that AI can do either now or in the very near future. So I think you should be trying to build those functionalities in. And I'll give you a little example with the reader, for example, what I'd like to see, and whether we can do it or not at this stage, I don't know. But when you go to scan a sample, that reader and the AI should be able to figure out, as well as the code for the sample when it's originally being put into the system, it should be able to see what that particular thing is, whether it's a vial, if it's a vial, what size the vial is. There's a lot of stuff that's being entered into systems at the moment that is really, pretty basic information that I think AI should be able to solve just to make the job of the lab technician easier and quicker and more efficient. They're not adding value by typing in that this is a 2 mil externally threaded vial. So let's try and automate that for them. So that new reader that we're trying to do, we just want it to be as functional as possible and as broad as possible so that it can read anything that's in a lab.
Okay. And talking a little bit about automation and some of the new capabilities that you guys are looking to put on this roadmap. You guys have been to SLAS in the past, which is usually the big automation space.
Yeah, not me, but the team has.
Okay. Yes, exactly. You'd be new to the conference, but
Yep.
Does Bluechiip plan to be at the SLAS conference in Boston this year as well to showcase some of these new technologies that might be on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely. So SLAS is locked in. We'll be exhibiting there, and that's just a chance to announce to the market. I mean, a lot of the market probably wouldn't even know that the company went through any issues, but we need to show to those that do that we're back, that we're up and running, and Mark II is going to be bigger and better than the first version. So going to that, I'll be there. It's important for me to get to these things and understand the customers, the market, start to understand the marketing side of things and the sales process, because again, I understand business, but each one is specific and has its own nuances. So definitely we're going to have the team there in February. We won't have a functioning prototype of the reader ready at that point, but hopefully we'll have some mock-ups as to what we're working on and what it's roughly going to look like. And we're working on a few other things as well. So there will definitely be a presence there, and that's a pretty important sales event for us.
We'd like to thank our guest, Damian Cullen, president of Bluechiip, a cryonics group brand, for joining us on the Biotech Stack. For more information on Damian or Bluechiip, please check out the links in our show notes below. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.